artists, and welcome to day 31 of the 365-day epic journey. A journey in which I intend to give you 365 lessons in 365 days. Today we're going to be discussing framing. No, not that kind of framing. Not the framing that you put your painting in. Compositional framing. So let's get into the lesson.
There's no going
So you
back.
can do what you wanna do. You can do what you wanna do.
So framing is twofold. We've got, first of all, the art of placing your composition within the frame of your painting. And secondly, we've got literal placing elements in your painting that are going to literally frame your subject or your central focal point. Okay, this is a little watercolor by Bojana Petkova. This is an example that I wanted to show you of what I'm not going to be talking about here. Okay, this is placing. This is placing. This is the first one here. Now, the reason I'm not going to be talking about placing your painting within a frame is because we're going to discuss rule of thirds and the golden mean. I will cover placing of compositional elements in a lot more detail when we discuss the rule of thirds, because we're going to talk about the rule of thirds as well as other ways of placing. So that is not what I'm going to be talking about here. So let's get rid of that one. What I'm going to be discussing here is the way in which artists literally frame their subject matter. Now, this is a little painting by ToulouseLautrec, and he did a lot of Moulin Rouge paintings, as you will know. And we know certainly that there is his central focal point here. We've got the flaming red hair and the light on this lady's face and the light table. But everything about this painting draws our eye to that point. But he's also used a couple of other aspects to almost separate us from that particular subject. He's put a lady right here in the extreme foreground, as well as a banister. Now, what he's and he's also got a little pillar on the side over here. But what he's effectively done is he has cancelled out all this part of the painting because he's brought it into the extreme foreground, and he's therefore separated us, the viewer, from the subject matter there in the middle. So let's go and have a look at another ToulouseLautrec, where he's also using people as elements. Here he's placed a very bright pink lady right in the foreground, and we've got a man standing on this side over here. But what that has effectively done is it's framed his central focal point, which is the dancer. So the rest of this is all context, so that we know where the dancer is and what she's doing. But these two very obvious figures right in the foreground put themselves between us and the subject matter. So we become almost voyeuristic, where I know it sounds like a terrible word, but we become onlookers. We're not actually part of what is going on. We're watching what is going on from a little bit of a distance. And the framing of that subject matter within two very obvious foreground elements, being these two people, does that for us. It separates us from what's going on in the painting. Okay, Vermeer, this is Johan Vermeer, one of my absolute favorite. I love this man. Vermeer does the same thing with this curtain here. He separated us from what's going on. So we're in the same room, but we're not part of what is happening here. This almost intimate little conversation that's going on between the artist and his model is something that we're watching. We've also got a chair placed right in the foreground here, which also serves to separate us from what's going on there. So it's framed. There's our central focal point, of course. Very big bright area over there, spilling off, of course, into that direction. But this curtain here is what actually separates us and frames that little central focal point. Another way of framing your central focal point is by color. If you have a look here, she's very obviously our central focal point. She's right in the middle of the painting, as well as being very brightly red. But look how this beautiful light on the sides here actually provide a frame in which she is placed. So again, this negative space here and the bright contrast of those colors is framing her within that context. This is one of my favorite kinds of framing, where you've actually got a central focal point or a subject matter that is separated by foreground elements. So here we've got this in a cute little triangle composition. And of course we've got all this foreground element here, which is again separating us from what is going on in the distance. Now this one, this is an artist, her name is Grace Korte. She's a South African artist, and she has got to be one of my favorite artists, I think, of all time. She's magnificently talented. If you ever get a chance to get to Durban and get to a gallery called The Loading Bay. The Loading Bay is owned and run by Grace Korte, and a lot of her artwork is in it, but she does feature artworks from all sorts of other artists as well. Now this little painting is a painting of her brother that I've seen in real life. It's quite small, but it's beautifully painted. And I love the way she's framed, because what she's done is she's put very dark elements at the top, and she's focused all the attention here in the middle. Now, our central focal point, of course, is the face, but she's highlighted the slightly darker area of his neck with the light behind him. So everything about this composition draws our eye to his face. Okay, here we have a Corey Henry. Now he's very literally creating a frame in which his subject sits. A lot of his paintings do this. He gets quite involved with sort of quite religious paintings as well, and they're beautifully done in terms of the framing of them. It's almost as if you're sitting inside a building looking out through a window. He literally frames his subject matter. This is a very vivid example of how color can frame a subject matter. This is an artist named David Palumbo. He has literally framed his subject matter by putting her on a very bright red background. And she, of course, is in monochrome, so she's beautifully framed by the entire background. This doesn't serve in the same way as the Toulouse-Lautrec composition served, where he's framed in elements that separate us from the subject matter. It's a totally different kind of framing. This color is bringing us right into the intimate space of this model. Oh, Renoir. Oh man, do I love Renoir. Now Renoir has used a couple of different ways of framing here. He's done a very similar thing to Lautrec, where we've got a lovely central focal point and we've got foreground elements here that draw us into it. But unlike Lautrec, these large elements are not there to separate us from what is going on in this painting. They're actually there to almost include us. We become part of the party. It's almost as if this table that is right here in the foreground, here, the chair that would be on this end of the table is you. You are the viewer. You are part of this party. But then on top of all of that, he's given us this awning here, which gives us a ceiling onto this painting. We've also got this lovely green area here, which gives us an edging. There's the two that I discussed earlier. So all this that's going on in here has got framework all around it, including yourself. You become part of the frame. Okay, here we have Adam Caldwell. Now, Adam Caldwell paints a lot of portraiture, and you can see he's done a very similar thing to Grace Korte here, where he's actually framed that face. He's actually framed that face with very dark elements all the way around it to draw our eye into that face. And now we move on to a Henry Asensio. He's done a very similar thing to the Andre Cohn, where if you remember correctly, Andre Cohn had the red dress and the light backgrounds. Henry's done the same thing here, where he's provided us with framing of very light and very nondescript paintbrush brushwork to give us a much more descriptive central focal point. This is quite a typical way of using framing. It's very common, where we've got trees in the foreground and a little house in the background, so it's drawing our eye deep into the distance of the painting, and the trees are giving us the foreground framing elements, as well as all this dark down here, helping to give us foreground framing elements. And then of course, as this is balanced in this direction, so we've got the tree balancing in that direction, so we've got almost the corners of this painting is the frame. Richard Johnson does a very similar thing as well to Adam Caldwell, Grace Korte, and those various artists, in that he's using negative space. In this case, however, he's using light negative space and dark background in that area there to draw out to the subject matter, and all of this here is framing her. Okay, artists, that is framing. Just to recap, I'm not discussing framing as in placing your elements within a frame. That we're going to discuss when we talk about the rule of thirds. This is talking about framing by using elements to surround and emphasize your central focal point. So please will you like and share and subscribe and all those social media things. And I will see you tomorrow in day 32 with leading lines as we continue with compositional elements.
That's what you
Bye.
wanna do.